I'm Brandon Cross from Hoyack, and I'm doing our very first inaugural Whiteboard Wednesday. So I want to talk today about a topic that comes up quite a bit, and the big question a lot of times people have in their minds whenever they go about trying to solve some kind of special problem in their organization. Because really, organizations have like so many different little components to them, right? You have these, your accounting, your HR, your marketing departments, and all these different things. But then that's the standard stuff. I would call that the horizontal layer. Okay, so the horizontal layer of the business is the stuff that every business has in it. HR, accounting, etc. And one of the interesting things, though, is that most businesses aren't strictly horizontal. A lot of businesses actually they focus on an actual vertical industry. And so a vertical industry, in case anybody doesn't know, is essentially a specialized industry that is specific to what you do. So that might be something like healthcare or insurance, whatever it may be. It could be hospitality, fintech, so many different vertical industries. And when you're running a business, you end up with a set of kind of horizontal frameworks and vertical frameworks. So especially when you build out a tech stack, right? You might say, okay, well, my tech stack is made up of some things like QuickBooks for my accounting, and maybe HubSpot for my CRM. Common horizontal solutions. But when we get into the thing that matters the most to really driving what we would call your unfair competitive advantage, or any kind of thing that you're doing that's special, it's going to tie back to your vertical. Okay. So most of the time, organizations need something called an LOB. An LOB stands for line of business. And this is your vertical line of business software. Maybe a specialized module of QuickBooks, for example, in many cases, could be a sort of verticalized type solution that tries to sort of conform these different systems, these horizontal systems that you're using. They may be, hooked back in to your vertical LOB, but that's not always the case. And in many cases, in many organizations, a vertical piece of software might be, like, let's say for healthcare, that could be something like an EMR system. Okay, so the EMR, the electronic records management, or EHR, electronic health, systems. These things are they are highly verticalized. Okay, any specialized industry you're in, whether you're managing a horse stable, or whether you're managing medical practices, or a hospital, or manufacturing and distribution, any number of different things, they all kind of go back to that line of business solution. Now, so keeping it kind of generic here instead of specifying, medical or something like that. There's this big consideration though that pops up. We say, well, there's all of these we have this specific set of things that go on inside of our processes, and they tie back to all kinds of different things that create the ultimate product or service that the organization might be delivering. All right, and so that oftentimes creates a little bit of an issue when that process doesn't align with a solution that would be considered what's called a COTS solution. COTS, okay, stands for common off the shelf. So in the case of having this COTS solution as for your LOB, you're just going to go buy a product. Maybe it's a QuickBooks plugin, maybe it's a a CRM plugin. Maybe it's any number of things. It might just be like a dedicated special cloud service package that's related specifically to your industry. And many of these can be found in like on sites like Capterra. Capterra is a real popular one. It's a website that has all these different vertical industries. You like, oh, I'm in this industry or that industry, and then here's all the different special like cloud-driven solutions or desktop applications that have to go along with that. So let's say that you're running a restaurant and you need you have your regular back office, right? You're ordering products, and you're restocking. So you kind of have like your QuickBooks kind of has like maybe inventory management capabilities, and then maybe you have your CRM contacting like your customers or your the people that come and visit your restaurant. But your LOB is basically going to be your point of sale system, right? Because like a point of sale system is a very, very specific type of line of business solutions. Receipt printers and barcode scanners, maybe credit card machine stuff, and then of course most of the time it's like touchscreen stuff. And a lot of times, like you have like thermal printers and you have impact printers, because in the kitchen, on the hot line in the kitchen, if you put the thermal printers back there, then it'll come out and it won't necessarily come out right. So you got to have like impact printers back there and then thermal printers up front. All these different little special little things you have to know about, like how to implement that technology inside of that environment. And then that technology is very, very specific to that environment. The software that it runs is very specific. Things like having a host stand that you can sit there and seat people at. And then, the servers being able to go into their side of it and enter their stuff for taking the orders. And then it goes back to the kitchen, and the kitchen having their sides. It's like, that's an example of a multi-modular LOB. It's got a lot of attachments to it and things, and sometimes you just buy like an all-in-one solution from one single source, like a Clover system or something like that, or Aloha. That's a common way to do it. Call the vendor up. You're like, hey, let's say you want to buy Aloha. Aloha is a very popular point of sale solution for restaurants. Okay, so you might say, well, I want to implement Aloha for my restaurant because my friend that runs a restaurant also uses Aloha and says that's what I need to use. So I'm going to get Aloha. Then you're going to call up a vendor and you're going to say, hey, I want to get that system, and they're going to come by and they're going to look at the situation and they're going to say, okay, we need to put this here and that there and do this and do that, and we need to sell you this and this and this and this, and then you need to buy this software, you need to buy this and this and this and this, then you need to buy the support, you need to buy this and that and the other. Common off-the-shelf solution. Now that's a case where you have the software, the hardware, and the service all bundled together, right? Because that's not necessarily the most common solution. You have, in that case, I'm talking about like the software layer, right? There's the hardware layer, and then there's the actual like services layer underneath that, right? And so that's an all-encompassing type of thing. You can't go just buy just the software for Aloha. You can't just go buy your own hardware like without a services vendor. I'm going to put down here, erase this S because we already have an S up here, and I'm going to put a V for vendor. Okay, so it's this is like an ecosystem type product. All right, there's several different type of ecosystem type solutions where you really can't just buy you can't just go sign up for like the web, cloud thing, and then, maybe like go on Amazon and shop around for the hardware and cobble it together yourself. I mean, maybe there are people that try, but generally, you're going to call that single source vendor. They're going to give you a kind of a full service solution. They're going to do the integration. They're going to do the support, the servicing, and everything on that. And so that's very, very interesting. But what is the other option here? Okay, let's just say that you are running your specialized nothing that's off the shelf, okay, is going to just work for that that situation, okay? Your process is a little unusual. The normal line of business solutions that apply to that process that you use just don't quite cut it. Or you know a trick that your industry may not broadly or widely know, or maybe you have some kind of unfair competitive advantage. It's very, very specific and very, very, maybe it's not a common thing. It could be unusual or something like that. In any case, whatever the case may be, if the solution that's right off the shelf, if it doesn't exist for your situation, then you can't just buy the solution, right? You can't just go shopping, hit up a vendor, get that thing, okay, boom, done, and then single source it, have it integrated and supported, or sign up for the cloud version of it, and have that taken care of. The cloud versions are great because then, there's usually like all the software stack for that is taken care of. And that's where like the software is running on hardware that you don't have to manage and maintain. A lot of the services vendors that manage like the hardware platforms that the software runs on, database servers, email servers, authentication systems, all the different things that run like your organization's actual systems. Might be like a horizontal systems vendor, right? Like maybe it's a managed systems provider, MSP type company or something like that. And they're actually like running this this thing here. And so here we are with this horizontal type vendor, and they're managing, maintaining maybe the hardware on top of it, or then there's also these things that are all running in the cloud, right? Maybe the MSP isn't really part of the thing. Maybe it's the cloud, right? And so the cloud is taken care of by, maybe on top of that there may be like a smaller layer of management where the MSP might ride on top of that or something. But those are kind of like how you cobble this stuff together. All right, and so the thing is that that when you cobble this stuff together this way, you have the full service, the full package. But maybe this doesn't work, right? We're talking about the LOB that is so custom, so special that you can't just buy the off the shelf solution. So what do you do in that case? And in that case, we're going to do a custom build, okay? And so in the case of the custom build, this is a whole entire different type of situation, okay? And so, in many cases, there's going to just be, a number of bricks that have to be put together and, kind of constructed to build that whole, that kind of framework that's going to fit into as your line of business. And so in a build versus buy type scenario, then those are the two primary ones that we get into. And that can apply to anything and everything. Now, there are people that say, I want to build the whole thing. I want to actually build my own accounting software, my own CRM, integrate across all my processes. I want my own, inventory management systems. I want my own specialized line of business systems. I want all these things. I want to build each one of those bricks myself. And so when you start to do that, it starts to really add up, okay? And so, and it can be very, very complicated. There are some systems that try to kind of like provide frameworks to make it sort of easy to sort of scaffold this stuff and get, all the different components of it, right? As you generally have, your servers, and you have your databases, and you have all of these systems that have to be built, and they might even be running on a cloud-based system and different things like that. And it has to be all set up manually and manually maintained, right? And so in that case, the the maintenance on that from, your, let's say your MSP or whatever technical provider that you're using is going to be like maybe more complicated. In many cases, these things have to have, a big DevOps layer on them. There may be, security operations that have to be on top of them. It's very much more of a larger kind of situation that you're dealing with when you're doing your own build, okay, right? And then of course these bricks sometimes kind of degrade a little bit, and then you also have to have your engineers, and these guys are basically going to be working on continuing to probably build new parts of this thing as it kind of goes, okay? And so that's sort of like the different scenarios we run into. Now, when is the right time to do a custom build? A lot of times when it's the right time, you know it, and there's no arguing about it, and that's how it has to be done, okay? Because it's basically like, we're going to go and we're going to do this, we're going to build this solution this way, and then it's going to have this massive competitive advantage, and there's no other common off-the-shelf solution that can do that. So the only people that can do that are the ones with their own custom builds. And so that's where you get into these like highly proprietary systems that businesses build for themselves that are that give them a tremendous unfair competitive advantage, and they're able to leverage this. And of course, like I'll just tell you right now, the costs for all these things versus costs for this, it's typically like, usually there's like some costs there's some costs there, and there's some costs here. But here, I mean, there's, big costs. There's lots of costs and costs and costs and costs and costs. It's just so many different costs you got to worry about. Then, obviously this here, is costing, and then maintenance on that stuff is costing. And, a lot of times, like, this is the preferred way in many cases, because, like, you should be able to go to, sign up for like the cloud version of some COTS solution that gives you some kind of LOB that gives you all the things you need, and then maybe you have to pay like either a specialized vendor, or you have to pay the integration team from that COTS solution to implement it in your organization in such a way where it's going to be properly configured to maximize what you're getting out of this. There's also another approach that people do take, and that is they just say, look, it'd be great to do this. This is beyond us. We have to use a COTS. I have to buy the best of breed COTS for my LOB situation. Is going to be this product right here. But my processes work differently than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually change our processes, and the process that we modify is going to work just a little bit differently, and that's going to allow us to be a fit for that solution. And so when we do that, we can actually oftentimes we can sort of bend the corporate culture, and we end up with a reasonable solution that can work well. Now, does that give us maximum competitive advantage? Maybe it gives us enough. Does it give us does it lower our costs? Probably. It probably does. It usually will simplify things at the very minimum. But the corporate culture that maybe has to get changed to maybe make that tweak to the process flow is probably more of the hard part there. And some organizations can succeed at that. Some organizations' culture is so deeply embedded, their processes, the training, you can't like retrain certain people or something like that. If you have a team of accountants that's been in there for 50 years, and it's just like they just know this process, and it's the only process they know, and they've been doing it forever, and you walk in and you say one day, we're going to change everything so that we can use this, they're probably, in many cases, sometimes there's resistance, sometimes there's just like, a lot of stress that can cause. But organizations that successfully do that benefit from being able to implement this at a lower cost versus doing a full build, which, I specialize in this. This is what I do, okay? This is fun, great, good stuff. A lot of people, this is the common way. I'm not really the common guy. So what I do is this is where I play, okay? So I build all this stuff. I used to do all of this and be, this MSP here and things. I used to be this single source vendor, that implemented the hardware and the software of the COT solutions. And then I'd have like another vendor that would be like just related to that, but I would also be related to that and maintaining all of the systems and everything else, okay? So, but now I've kind of moved into a model where I'm providing the custom builds, doing all the things, building from the ground up, mapping the processes in the organizations, determining, how we're going to fit those processes into the best of breed workflows, and then custom building each of the bricks for those different workflows, and then continuing on doing the maintenance and expansions and building more and more and more out, while also, providing all the engineering, all the DevOps, and then, a lot of times like the MSP and the SecOps go to a vendor that specializes in that. So that's the whole build versus buy kind of concept, and where businesses how businesses go about choosing which route they go. Many times it's driven by budget, it's driven by complexity, it's driven by need. Okay, not everybody needs this type of solution, but some people do, and it's just kind of figuring out, assessing what the best approach is. So those are my thoughts on the concept of build versus buy.